I'm Judge Charles Ehrlich from the Philadelphia County Court of Common Pleas. I sit in the criminal division. Becoming aware of trauma in the justice system or within people I dealt with in the justice system really started when I was in the district attorney's office, where I was a prosecutor for 25 years. And as part of that, I handled a lot of child abuse and domestic violence cases, and I was also a homicide prosecutor. And certainly with child abuse was the first time when I was doing those cases. You understand trauma because not only are you dealing with what happened to the victim, but also in what circumstances they live and grow up and other things that have happened to them, to be able to understand who they are and what they did and why they may not have reported the crime right away and why they have certain feelings about the person who may have abused them. So you begin to understand that there are a lot of other factors that go into people's thinking, and the trauma of their environment is one of those factors that shapes them. And then certainly in homicide cases, domestic violence cases, you see a lot of that, and you need to understand it because in order to explain people's actions to a judge or a jury, you need to understand why they did certain things or didn't do certain things as to their believability and as to explaining the context in which the case occurred. When I became a judge, this knowledge came with me, but I have seen it in a lot of defendants who come before me. One in particular was an individual who suffered from horrific child abuse but never disclosed it while growing up or even as an adult, but is now first coming to terms with it, which came out when we were doing the sentencing hearing, and which certainly explains some of his actions. It does not justify the illegal conduct, but puts it in a certain context, which allowed me to shape a sentence that I thought was more appropriate for him, that will promote his rehabilitation and protect the community. And I think that judges every day, and I'm only speaking for myself, you have to understand who's before you when dealing with what occurred in the case, as well as particularly during sentencings, to understand what the person has been through, what trauma they have had in their lives, how that may have affected their actions, and what is needed for the future. Well, I hope that more judges will become knowledgeable in this area. The kind of changes that you're asking about in the justice system that are needed are changes that will bring this knowledge to judges so that they're dealing, ultimately judges deal with people's lives. They're dealing with what will happen to them. Are they going to be free? Are they going to go to prison? How the community will be protected, the effect on their families. This kind of knowledge can be very crucial in trying to deal as appropriately as we can. We cannot foresee the future. Judges cannot predict at 100% accuracy. Every day we have to make judgments as to what to do with people so that they don't go and harm anyone else and can move forward in their lives. And this kind of knowledge, through education programs, through material that judges can have as part of their continuing education, can only give them further background so that when they're on the bench, they have this information and can use it, as I use it, to understand the people before them. Well, I can say that in the district attorney's office, we had when I was there, had a very strong education program. I was the chief of the municipal court unit for over 10 years, where the new prosecutors start in the trial division, and we had a almost year-long education program, and part of that was to bring in people to talk about why some of the psychological or psychiatric aspects of defendants and victims that they may be dealing with, to better understand people and to better be able to be more effective prosecutors. And that kind of education, whether on the introductory level or with more advanced units, we did it in the family violence and sexual assault unit, where people would talk about these things, because in order to be an effective prosecutor, you also need to understand people. And therefore, this kind of education and training becomes very important, because the district attorney's office, just like the court system, is the face of government. And how assistant DAs deal with witnesses and victims and defendants and families is very important in terms of how justice is done. When it comes to the court system, we've had a very strong education program, ongoing education program, and in fact, you spoke, Dr. Bloom, to the judges. We videotape that, and we show that as part of our new judges education program, so that that will be further background information. There's a lot of ongoing education that occurs, and this fits right in. When you ask what kind of lessons are learned from understanding trauma-informed care or trauma-informed information, I think it's part and parcel of the changes that are going on in the justice system. We have specialized courts now, like mental health court in Philadelphia, and drug treatment court, DUI treatment court for drunk driving cases. In order to have those kind of programs and others, you need to understand people and understand what they've been through and who is appropriate to go into a program like that, whose purpose is to try to deal with the issues and problems that brought them into the criminal justice system and prevent them from coming back. So I think that that kind of information and understanding how the brain works and how the brain works when exposed to trauma and why people may act in certain ways is very useful information to use in the court system, and hopefully can also be utilized in the prisons, so that when people get out of prison, if they've been able to have that kind of care or program shaped with that in mind, it can change their conduct in the future and prevent them from coming back into the criminal justice system. I think that as many different people that are involved, whether it's in the criminal justice system or through other social programs, understanding this information, making it a part of training, making it a part, whether it's doctors who are undergoing residency, understanding it in hospitals. We talk about judges getting education training who, when they start, or ongoing training, whether it's police, prosecutors, emergency medical technicians, and anybody who comes in contact with people who may be undergoing some of the stresses of trauma, to better understand how to deal with them. There's a lot of now ongoing training on how to deal with mentally ill people. This fits in with it, whether it's the police dealing with them, the court system, or other social service providers, so that instead of situations escalating, they can be de-escalated in a way that will protect everyone and will also allow the proper actions to be taken. Well, when you ask what kind of vision I could see for the future if people had this kind of trauma-informed care knowledge, I think that people would understand much better how to deal with people. And although that sounds simple, it's much more complicated. For example, I bring defendants back to have what we call status listings when they're on parole or probation, particularly during the first 6 to 12 months, to see how they're doing with drug treatment, getting a job, and other issues. I think that using this knowledge, a judge can be much more effective in trying to spur people on to change. None of us really likes to change. We only change when often we are forced to make certain changes, whether under a crisis or someone else forcing us. This kind of knowledge will help all types of people who deal with everyone to have what I would call a more humane and just society. Meaning that whether it's the person who is at the admitting clerk in the hospital, or the court staff person who is checking witnesses and defendants in, or the judge sitting on the bench, or someone working in a customer-related business. The more knowledge people have of this, the more that they, I think, will be able to make our society function in a better way. It's not that people have to be falsely friendly. It's that if they treat people, a lot of it is treating people with proper respect and understanding who they are. And for so many people in our society, they're not treated with respect, whether it's by the government or by business or by the hospital or any kind of other place that they may be at. The more that we can treat people with respect, the more civility will be promoted in our society and the better off we'll all be.